how sellers usually even find out, if they don't know it from YouTube, that Amazon owns them some money, because it's not that they get like some kind of notification on Seller Central, hey, Amazon is owning you some money.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, there are a lot of sellers out there. And while we think our messaging is everywhere, right? I mean, you're doing these podcasts, doing these conversations, posting to YouTube, posting on, social, going to conferences. And there is a community for sure that is very aware of this. And as you get more sophisticated in your business, you're more likely to be aware of it just because of the exposure. But if you're a new seller or you're a seller that's just sort of good at what you do and you don't go to conferences and you don't pay attention to it, for sure, it's easy to see it. That, it's easy to not know that this is a thing. What's amazing to me is the number of stores that we audit. So we onboard somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 30 people a day, about. The number of stores that have never had somebody in there auditing, it's certainly not all of them, let's be clear. Like, 10 of them probably have somebody that's been in there. 10 of them probably they've been doing it internally, and 10 of them have literally never done it. It's just baffling to me that at this stage, for as long as we've been doing this, that still continues to be a theme. But it's great because it means that we're really helping people out. And that feels good to be, building a business that is really benefiting people in a meaningful way. I mean, we are getting a lot of money back for most sellers, and at their own scale, it's meaningful. Whether you're doing $50,000 a year on Amazon or $50,000 a year on Amazon, or you're getting back roughly the same proportion of money, which is about 1%. As you get to be really big, it tends to get a little compressed just because you typically have more systems in place and you might be at, 80 basis points. And if you're kind of in that middle around 500 to 800,000 where you're kind of growing, but you probably have a lot of issues because you're scaling and you're struggling, you might be at 1.5%. But typically about 1% is a pretty fair number. And, you can easily figure out what your top line revenue is and about what you're owed back. And it's a lot of money. I mean, we find people, it's just crazy how much money we find on a regular basis.
Okay. And out of all of those different kinds of areas where Amazon could be owning money to seller, what do you think, what is like the most difficult one for sellers to manage on their own and get money back? Is it maybe some inventory issues, or as you mentioned, something about customer returns, like where it's usually quite difficult? Either Amazon asks for a lot of documents or like very detailed cases or something like this.
Yeah. So I would actually flip it, the question, if you don't mind. And I would say the easiest part is getting when they miscounted on missing inbound. Like, that's the easiest. It typically has the most bang for your buck. You get back the most amount of money because they lose 50 pieces in a shipment, and and they're $10 a piece, so it's immediately $500. That's easy. The harder one is where you have to reconcile by way of looking at, let's say, 3 or 4 sales reports, which is how we ingest that data. That's the sales data we ingest, which we then spin against each other, and we look for anomalies within the records, which indicate that there are probably some problems. It's much more difficult to identify that. You almost have to go line by line in a spreadsheet with no real way of cross-linking them. And so that's where it gets complicated, especially if your business has any real volume. You're selling 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 pieces a month. You're trying to reconcile individual cases, 1-offs, 2-offs, 3-offs that happen in the warehouse, in 6 different warehouses across the country. And the complexity of that grows exponentially very quickly unless you have it systematized. And the reason that it's not so bad for us is we've written all this proprietary software where we smash those reports together in an algorithm, which then outputs something that gives our case manager, let's just say it was 10,000 cases. It compresses that down to, say, 50. And then that person eyeballs what looks appropriate and what doesn't. And then that's sort of the subjective nature of it. And then we have to file the cases peer-to-peer on Amazon, because I mentioned in the beginning of this, then you got to be careful about compliance. If you're not careful, you can do things that Amazon gets upset with. And one of those is, for example, submitting tickets by way of bots or doing it with ChatGPT or doing things like that. Like, it needs to be done peer-to-peer. Our customer service rep or your person at your company needs to physically send that communication to Amazon and have a back and forth. And they do that so that there aren't fraudulent tickets submitted, and it doesn't waste their time that, you're submitting tickets that, shouldn't be done.